Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Happy New Year, viewers. It's so good to be with you on today's first edition for the year of Money Radio, Energy Focus. My name is Winifred Webo. It's a pleasure to be hosting you today's program. And with me in the studio is an in-house analyst. Of course, she is the group business editor for Leadership newspaper, Inse Anthony Ugo. Happy New Year.
Same to you. It's good to be here again.
It is.
Yeah.
How was your holiday season?
It was very well. It went fine.
Thank you so much. Viewers, it's a pleasure for us to be here today presenting in this new year. And this is Leadership Television. We are going to be looking at making Nigerians' expectations for stable energy supply count in 2023. That's the topic for today's discussion. You will agree with me that last year 2022, was filled with so many hard times for Nigerians, along with the high price of food items due to inflation, flooding and the Russian-Ukraine crisis, poor electricity and petrol supply also heightened their plights. Now, this year, 2023, comes with renewed expectations that the right measures will be taken to ensure a more sustained energy supply for Nigerians. So that's what we are going to look at. Let's do a recap of last year's energy focus. How did it go?
Yeah.
In terms of electricity first.
Yes, let's take it like you said, electricity. Nigerians, they really had a lot of hard times. With the Russian-Ukraine war, which set off in February last year, it came with a lot of extra costs on especially diesel, on energy price generally. And as a result of that, there was a hike in crude oil price internationally. And this saw Nigeria being hit very hard at a time when it would have, been having a lot of income coming. But the price of gas shot up astronomically as a result of all this internationally, and in country, Nigeria was affected. And we saw, because Nigeria generally operates 80% gas thermals for electricity generation. Only 20% are hydro. So with gas price shooting up, we saw many of the gas thermals unable to maintain generation of electricity. And with that, the supply of electricity really went down. And even the little that was supplied, many Nigerians, they cried out over high tariff, which is yet to stop. And so
yes, we are going to which
is yet to stop. So that was the plight for many Nigerians. And then when the flooding that came up during the year, it also affected the hydros. When generation for hydros would have improved, there was now excess water, and all of that added to make the electricity generation from the national grid to the people not as stable as it should be. And with the hike in the price of diesel, that compounded the cost on businesses, because the cost for electricity generation became extremely high for many business operators.
Now, we also had issue of a collapse of the national grid. Yes. At least from my own counting, year 2022, that is just last year that passed. I think Nigeria witnessed about 8 collapse of a national grid. Would you want to shed light on that?
Yeah, there were many collapse. Like I mentioned earlier, what causes many of these grid collapses is when the power that is going into it is not enough to balance the grid. So as a result of the inability of many of the Genco generating companies to generate enough as a result of gas constraints. We many grid collapses. Aside the one that was induced by, uh, it was technically induced by the workers of electricity workers
Okay.
who on their own shut down the grid
Okay, because they wanted.
because they were protesting over some things they didn't agree about in their emoluments and all that. So there were 7 other system collapse, and it just did not suit the demands of
Okay,
Nigerians.
there's also reports that sorry, some dailies that the output, the megawatts for last year was oscillating between about even 2,875 megawatts and 4,000.
Yeah, that's of course this fluctuation is what we're talking about in terms of the quantum of energy generated and distributed.
But how come?
We
Because what I'm saying this is that 8 years, almost 8 years down the line, and it's when this incoming administration came into being, they met 4,000 megawatts. So at the end of the day, it could not be sustained and it could not be improved upon.
in fact, Nigeria's problem when it comes to electricity generation, it transcends this administration, because if we're to look at it critically, Nigeria has virtually remained stagnant on 4,000 megawatts
Over the years.
for close to 40 years. So it's like most of the so-called interventions in the power sector has really not yielded any result in terms of translating to improved energy generation and supply to Nigerians. So I think it's high time that the authorities would begin to look at how to properly align these things, because it's always if it's not an issue with generation today, the gas constraints, the generating companies cannot generate enough. It comes down to the issue of the transmission capacity. The transmission company of Nigeria that is owned by the federal government, the infrastructure will not be able to transmit what has been generated. And if it is not a transmission problem, it becomes a distribution problem, whereby the distribution companies are always complaining of vandals, their system being
Vandalized.
infrastructure being vandalized. And over the years, I think the major issue here is that there has not been an intentional and concerted effort made in improving the infrastructure at all levels. While the generating companies may want to do that because they are private companies, the transmission company is fully owned by the federal government, and the distribution companies are owned 40% by the federal government. So there has been a lot of buck passing here. The private sector will say, "Oh, we didn't meet all the criteria that they said, all the things we were promised. We did not meet the distribution facility as we thought it were." And then, yet, federal government has been intervening, but Nigerians are yet to see any reasonable improvement in power supply.
Thank you. Now, what is the situation on ground regarding the discourse? Because the last we heard, the federal government did say they were taking over or something like that.
Yeah, some
Nothing
of
has
them,
been
some of them were taking. Actually, 5 distribution companies were taken over, but not really by the federal government. What was taken over was not the 40% ownership of the federal government, but the 60% ownership of the private sector companies who borrowed resources from financial institutions to pay for those acquisitions, and they were in default. So to get back their monies, the financial institutions had to step in and then recover those assets for themselves. So it's not, it really did not have to do with the federal government. It actually had to do with the private sector equity that the former owners were not uh, living up to in terms of repaying to the financial institutions.
Okay. Thank you so much. We still have time there. We're still looking at the electricity sector. Now, the discos, talking about the discos, what are they doing to ensure that more houses are metered? Because that is also one of the issues at stake. Most houses are not metered. And is there no concerted effort to work with for instance, MBS? They do carry out survey. They know how many houses there are, and they know the the into to houses and clusters and all those stuff to ensure that most of these houses are metered, because we keep hearing promises and promises of getting people meters and getting them on the billing list.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the problem is not knowing the number of the problem doesn't really lie with knowing the number of houses.
Then
Even
why are they
even
not
even
getting?
the houses that are known,
No, they are not
they
metered.
are not yet
Then what is
metered.
the
So
issue?
it is when they
Is it
finish
that there are not
it is
enough
when they
meters?
finish metering the ones that have been identified that
Mm.
you now begin to look for the ones that are not, that are off
Mm.
radar, to identify them and
Yes.
meter them.
So
So
even those
even
ones that are
yes,
identified, why are
even
they
those
not giving them
ones,
meters?
there's still a shortfall of over 5 million unmetered
Houses.
houses.
5 million.
Yeah, and in the year 2022, despite all the promises with the rollout of the national metering program, expected that
And even with the directives from the same
yes,
president
it was expected that up to 5 million meters will be um,
distributed.
distributed and installed. But at the end of the year, 1 million was barely done.
Mm. 1
1 million.
million was barely
And
done. That means there's
yes,
still a shortfall of over 4 million.
yes. So with that, the expectation is that the phase one of that program will be embarked upon this year. So that is an area of expectation Nigerians are looking forward to. Will the organizations, will they be able to fulfill the promises on metering that has been on ground all over those years? And metering will actually mean that the distribution companies will be able to generate better revenues, and
Oh yes, that
they
is
will
just
generate
better
better
revenue.
revenues,
And at the end of the
and it
day,
will improve, what they have on ground to be able to provide many of this other infrastructure that is needed. And then the people, the consumers that are already metered will not be overburdened with too much payment, because that is what
that
we
is
have
where I
seen.
was coming to.
We have
Yes.
seen that there
Consumers
has
are
been,
overburdened.
yes, many consumers have complained about
Yes.
arbitrary
Increase.
increase in their
Tariff.
tariff without even informing them,
Yes.
but many of them are not aware. You buy
Units.
units
Electricity
this
units.
month. By the time you buy
The next
again the
month.
next month, it's not the same.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission only allows for two minor reviews within the year, and then a 5 year major review.
But however, that is not the case, because we've had cases. There have been reports that in some parts of Abuja, there has been an arbitrary increase every time they go. Just like you pointed out, they go to buy units, electricity units, and discover that units keep reducing over time. Like this last one was just too drastic. From many people complain that they buy 5,000 units, and they starting from early last year, that was year 2022,
Yeah.
used to be 1,000, 100 units
Mhm.
for 5,000. That means
20
units
for
for 1,000.
1,000.
But that is not the
And
case.
that
Just within a year.
that means about 50
Yes.
50
Yes.
naira
From
per
last
unit.
month now, it's reduced to, from 100 units now is 69 for that same 5,000
And
naira.
that translates to about 73, 74
Naira per
naira
unit.
per unit.
And we're also having reports that there are plans to also increase this January, or they have increased this January. So what happens? This arbitrary increase, why is it that consumers are being overburdened?
I think a lot of the consumers need to band together and then make a unified presentation to the Nigerian Electricity
Okay.
Regulatory uh,
Commission.
Commission, because the commission allows for 2 reviews annually.
Yes.
So if in your area you have had more than 2 reviews
Yes, I've had cases.
during the year, then a written complaint needs to be made, and then so that the commission looks into it and then calls the distribution company to explain what has happened.
So in a nutshell, the NEC is not aware of what is happening.
Of course, that's what it means. Where the two allowed minor reviews that are done within the year, that means that the distribution companies are doing that as their own instance without recourse to the NEC. Otherwise, there should be a review in January and there should be another review in July. So any review that is outside of those periods mean that it is a regulation, it's a recourse to NEC.
Thank you so much. We are going on a break on this note. When we come back, we'll be looking at the oil sector. Don't go away.
Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
You're welcome back. In case you're just joining us, the program is Energy Focus on Money Radio. It's reaching you on Leadership Television. My name is Winifred Ugaba. With me in the studio is an in-house analyst. There's a group. She's the group business editor of Leadership newspaper. She is Ise Anthony Booker. Thank you so much for your set time. And of course, before we went on a break, we were looking at making Nigeria's expectation for stable energy supply count in 2023. Of course, the year 2022 is past, it's gone, but there were so many hardships and challenges along the way, especially in the energy sector. Before we went on a break, we were talking about the electricity sector. Now let's look at the air sector. Instead, what are the challenges?
We just kind of came back from a stretch of fuel scarcity that had many motorists queuing up at filling stations endlessly
Since February.
Yes,
it's February 2022.
Yes, it was a year filled with on and off, and the reprieve was always a very short period, because when motorists are just commuters are just settling down to the fact, oh, the fuel scarcity is gone, another long queue begins. Yes, that was the situation. And coupled with that, before now, Nigeria still enjoys subsidy on petrol, but we saw the situation whereby many filling stations were selling fuel at prices far above the regulated pump price of petrol, and that has been a serious issue for everyone. Very few of the filling stations that you could buy at the official pump price, which is now 175 to a liter of petrol. Other
175 or 179. NNPC is selling 179.
Well,
And of course, if NNPC is selling 179, it follows that others are selling it's 182, 183.
yeah. So, however, in many filling stations, that was not the case. Many of them were selling for 220,
Oh, yes.
230,
And even 300.
and even 300. And then coupled with this, you now saw black marketers having the field day, even more often than not, right in front of major filling stations. You see them, there is no fuel in the filling station, but the black marketers,
and right in front of the filling stations.
Right in front of them. So it was really a tough year when.
And it was something I think on the program I asked you that we used to have task force, petrol task force, that they will go to all these filling stations, and because we also saw situations whereby most of these filling stations, they actually had fuel, but they were not dispensing, they were not selling.
Yes,
to sell
yes. We saw that manifest when the DSS gave directive that within 48 hours they wanted the fuel scarcity to be stopped, and it actually worked.
Yeah, it did.
Because after that, we saw that a lot of the filling stations where products actually began to sell, and there was more products. However, besides this, there are still underlying issues that are that made the situation the way it was, and one of it was, like I said earlier on this show, the increase in the price of diesel, because a lot of the stations they operate their filling stations running on diesel. The distributors, the tanker drivers, their tankers run on diesel and all of that, and so having to distribute petrol that is regulated running on diesel that is not regulated, and the price went as high as from barely 200 naira per liter to as high as 800, 850, and even 900 per liter during the course of last year. So that made the situation very, very hard.
Too, one thing that is also not clear, very, very clear, is the fact that Nigerians said they have spent about almost 6.6 trillion naira subsidy. Now, how can we pay? Many people are wondering, and people like including me, yours sincerely, how can we pay so much for subsidy for a product that is not available, readily available? You pay subsidy for, if I'm not mistaken, for a product that are coming in, landing cost you pay. Then how come the product, even with all the high subsidy, was not readily available?
That remains an issue of contention. The volume of petrol that is consumed by Nigerians. Before this administration, we had what was the data available indicated that Nigeria consumed about 37 liters million liters of petrol every day. However, in the last 8 years, we have seen this figure balloon. We have seen at a point 100 million liters per day was actually quoted.
And the emir, we even had the emir who was the CBN governor saying that no.
Yes, at that point, yes, there is not possible that such astronomical increase will be recorded in the number of cars, or is it in what really increased so much? But actually, the fact that Nigeria lacks adequate data to back up this the consumption petrol consumption volume in the country lent a lot of it gave room for people to, for corruption to thrive within that sector. And that's why a lot of people were actually calling for the removal of subsidy. And, even with the passage of the Petroleum Industry Act in 2021, it was expected that by now, petrol subsidy would have been removed, and then everything would have by now stabilized. Of course, Nigerians would have had to bear the brunt heavily. But even at that, Nigerians have still suffered despite that the subsidy remains. Yet many people have been milking the country dry.
Right. Now, you just mentioned the PIA, that is the Petroleum Industry Act. When PIA was on stream, many thought that PIA was the answer to the oil sector. Now, 2 years after, so how will you rate it?
Yeah, if we're starting from the removal of petrol subsidy, we saw the situation where the presidency extended the implementation of PIA on petrol subsidy removal by 18 months.
Yes.
So that means that the subsidy will run up to June this year. And that is why in the 2023 budget, another 3.6 trillion has been budgeted.
Yes,
budgeted for payment of subsidy up to half of this year, up to June 2023. And so it is from there we'll begin to see how it plays out. However, if the necessary measures are not taken, like Nigeria has been banking on Dangote refinery beginning operation. They've been banking on having more of Nigeria's moribund refineries resuscitated and beginning to refine the crude that is consumed, the product that is consumed in country. It means that by the time the subsidy is finally removed, there's going to be a lot more hardship than what is currently being seen. And so it's for the policymakers, the authorities, to fast track this reforms that needs to be made, ensure that Nigeria begins to refine products in country, so that a lot of this burden of the product coming in at a much higher price than it is now would be removed by the time the PIA sets in and subsidy is removed.
Wow, how time flies so soon. Well, viewers, we already wrapping up on today's energy focus on Leadership Television. It's been a pleasure, having you on the program. And next time, I want to ask you how this 2023 is going to play out, because personally, the electricity sector is already on a bad note with this increase, and this goes to are not helping matters, because we don't know what is going to happen to them. Anyway, we'll end it now. Next week, don't forget, next week, same time, same station, is another day. Listen, looking forward to seeing you.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye for me. Now. I remain Winifred Bye.